The 2007 release of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare significantly altered the trajectory of the first-person shooter genre, revolutionizing multiplayer games by introducing new irrevocable standards, such as perk and progression systems. In unleashing the groundbreaking experience, developer Infinity Ward turned Call of Duty into a household name, effectively setting the stage for its transition into one of entertainment's most lucrative brands. But while publisher Activision's Golden Goose reached for the stratosphere, a behind-the-scenes falling out slowly begat a very public legal dispute. Infinity Ward's ousted co-founders Jason West and Vince Zampella refused to sit idly by after their split from Activision, however, instead striking out on their own with dozens of Call of Duty veterans tagging along. Respawn Entertainment came as the result of this exodus, and strategic deals with Electronic Arts and Microsoft allowed the studio of industry veterans to venture beyond their wheelhouse, specifically to a distant future ravaged by war. Wars fought with wall-running pilots and battle tanks. Frenetic movement ruled the day in Titanfall, alongside the exoskeletons that players could summon mid-battle. Critics and players lauded the first game's ingenious design, though its online-only accessibility left much to be desired for those who wanted more out of the futuristic world. A second entry righted the wrongs of its predecessor on multiple counts, yet an ill-timed launch window and issues with hackers stunted its potential. The series more or less lives on in Respawn's uber-popular Apex Legends, but the Battle Royale lacks many of its forefathers' more enduring charms. Much to the chagrin of Titanfall faithful, any hope for the brand's proper return never lingers for very long. This is the rise and fall of Titanfall. Jason West and Vince Zampella publicly announced Respawn Entertainment in April 2010. In doing so, the duo emphasized the importance of IP ownership, fully believing it constituted the best way to ensure the integrity and quality of their creative endeavors. Joining forces with Electronic Arts through the EA Partners label provided Respawn this opportunity, courtesy of an arrangement that analysts deemed unprecedented. The deal worked such that EA would manage publishing duties of future Respawn projects whose rights the studio owned, all while funding the developer with several $1 million in seed capital. Since the team had yet to decide on what its debut experience would entail, West merely teased that a huge summer blockbuster sat on the horizon. Huge couldn't have been more accurate given the final product's subject matter. Titans were nowhere on the agenda at first, though. Despite the pedigree of its founding members, the California-based crew balked at immediately limiting itself to producing a shooter. As producer Drew McCoy stated in a VG247 interview, Respawn started with a blank slate, leaving the floor open to any and all ideas. Exploring the various pitches that developers tossed around proved challenging without the necessary technology on hand. In lieu of the right equipment then, some artists resorted to old-school techniques, which included kit bashing and model making. The road to 20-foot-tall BattleBots began with lead artist Joel Emsley using plastic model kits to build 12 to 14-inch soldiers. An 8-foot power suit entered the equation soon thereafter, offering just enough height for regular-sized soldiers to fit right inside. Thoughts about the stressors of survivability in multiplayer games pervaded in-house conversations at the time, too. The problem being that a headshot from across a map in Battlefield or Call of Duty could instantly eliminate an unaware player. Respawn shifted the stakes, building new foundations based on Emsley's positioning of a 3-inch soldier model next to a mech statue. The shooter's big versus little design ethos thus took hold from this point forward. Titanfall's anthropomorphic battle mechs drew life from plastic model-making experiments, but its parkour-intensive movement mechanics spawned because of one programmer's wall-running mod in Half-Life 2. While examining different game engines during the prototyping stage, a Respawn programmer working in an evaluation version of Valve's Source engine tested wall-running mechanics in a Half-Life 2 corridor typically blocked by Combine soldiers. As opposed to facing the infantrymen head-on, the developer wall ran behind the soldiers, then shot an enemy from above while passing over. Drew McCoy explained that seeing this marriage of movement and combat changed a lot for him creatively. Evidently, the mod impacted the trajectory of the project as well. Once the basic tenets of towering titans and fast-moving pilots were settled on, the crew nailed down the differentiating factors between its new IP and the competition it would face in a market oversaturated with military shooters. According to game director Steve Fukuda, mobility, survivability, and bridging the gap between multiplayer mechanics and cinematic storytelling represented the three primary goals that drove Respawn to craft its genre-defying first-person shooter. The interest in cinematic storytelling didn't form on a whim. McCoy later told VentureBeat that Titanfall developers prototyped a single-player campaign for the first game after completing the earliest multiplayer build. Without a sufficient amount of production time and manpower, leads figured they lacked the resources to build multiplayer and single-player components that could withstand the scrutiny of its internal quality bar. All development efforts honed in on online play as a result. Yet abandoning the story campaign outright wasn't on the cards. Respawn combined the strengths of both offerings to formulate a storyline, character, and cool moments that players would hopefully invest in long-term. The final result culminated in a shooter whose story-driven multiplayer battles allowed users to absorb the plot chapter by chapter, specifically via introductory cinematics and post-mission epilogue sequences. All in all, the narrative framing dropped pilots onto a battle-worn planet at the start of each online match to complete relatively bog-standard FPS objectives like point capture. Throughout the game, pilots would unlock giant mechs, ever so slightly shifting the balance of power. 1980s sci-fi in the vein of Star Wars, Blade Runner, and vehicle sim Abrams' Battle Tank influenced the design of Titanfall's mechs, with every machine's core aesthetic harkening back to an analog feel. Built to empower the player in and out of the cockpit, Titans enjoyed more than their fair share of battlefield advantage, but ensuring the hulking mechs didn't break the game required a delicately played balancing act, which Respawn managed in part by equipping all pilots with anti-Titan weapons capable of dispatching the BattleBots with some semblance of ease. Developers further dampened the raw power of machines upon limiting their movements, eschewing jumping mechanics and restricting rocket-powered capabilities to dashing maneuvers. Interestingly, maintaining equilibrium across the game's design scheme ventured far beyond the small-scale versus large-scale motif. It also applied to the structure of the ambitious multiplayer suite, especially since the very fabric of Titanfall's existence relied wholly on Azure, Microsoft's cloud-based technology that, as far as gaming applications were concerned, seemed widely unproven at the time.
Key accepted. Welcome, pilot.
Respawn entered pre-production on Titanfall in 2011, initially looking to 7th-generation consoles as the platforms of choice. Using Source Engine seemed the optimal decision given the small team's familiarity with its inner workings. Source provided a few other benefits as well, according to software engineer Richard Baker, who noted in a Polygon interview that the Valve-created engine supported Respawn's vision of targeting 60 frames per second on PS3 and Xbox 360. On top of its frame rate advantage over competing third-party engines, Source further constituted a safe bet for development on PS3, or, as Baker put it, the riskiest platform on the market. Eventually, the studio shelved the PS3 iteration altogether. But Respawn shifted its priorities away from 7th-gen consoles before its publishing partner Electronic Arts struck an exclusivity deal with Microsoft. For one, the technical constraints of the older hardware weighed heavily on the team while it worked towards ironing out Titanfall's various gameplay mechanics. Developers also expressed concerns about wasting resources by optimizing code for a generation of consoles whose days were already numbered. As such, instead of moving forward with what Joel Emsley described as jerry-rigged techniques, focusing on then next-gen technology became a top priority for the Titanfall crew, an effort permitting them the opportunity to pursue far more ambitious ends. Speaking with Engadget in 2014, engineer John Shiring claimed he began advocating for the implementation of dedicated servers soon after the studio opened its doors in 2010. The expense involved in such an undertaking caused a bit of apprehension, though, leading to discussions with Microsoft about future plans for the Xbox ecosystem. Said plans revolved around the Azure cloud infrastructure, a service Microsoft primarily used for business-related applications. The tech giant expanded its server footprint for Xbox One, offering developers extra computing power because the console itself could only deliver so much in the way of raw horsepower. Azure consequently proved an essential part of Titanfall's genetic makeup by untethering Respawn from the limitations of the console's CPU. Offloading certain systems, namely AI processing and campaign content, to dedicated servers, freed up space for the internal systems of a PC or Xbox One to output higher quality visuals and smoother frame rates. In addition, studio co-founder Vince Zampella maintained cloud implementation mitigated issues such as host advantage, as well as introduced more stable experiences, which suggested Azure would stave off gameplay affecting latency hiccups. Furthermore, the cloud computing structure supported AI bots, the so-called popcorn enemies, who spawned as cannon fodder to supply players with XP bonuses. The game's dependence on cloud services convinced some developers Titanfall wouldn't have been possible without the benefits of dedicated servers, and it was that dependence that arguably stopped the title short of reaching its full potential. Hints about Respawn Entertainment's debut outing began circulating in 2011, thanks to comments wherein EA Label's president Frank Gibeau teased the studio's sci-fi shooter. Gibeau withheld concrete details, yet boasted the new property had the potential to compete with the likes of Gears of War and Halo. An April 2013 trademark filing by Respawn and a Kotaku report a couple of months thereafter outed the mech motif before the developer could lift the veil itself. However, Titanfall still managed to wow the crowd during Xbox's E3 2013 press briefing. The intersection of maneuverability and combat especially captured the audience's attention, yielding the shooter a unique identity that helped build anticipation for its 2014 release on PC, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. Its multiplayer focus and reliability on cloud computing invited skepticism, though. So too did news that Titanfall would only support 6-on-6 matches, with 12 computer-controlled combatants boosting the number of pilots assigned to each team. Despite the public's less than cheerful response, Respawn stuck to its guns. Lead designer Justin Hendry insisted the limited headcount represented the ideal way to play, evidenced by playtests in which higher counts left users feeling uncomfortable about the intensity of each battle. Most notably, the team found there existed too many ways for pilots to ambush their foes, since Titanfall's verticality and mobility permitted no less than 5 directions from which players could be killed. These various points of attack were deliberately designed to discourage ground-level skirmishes and encourage constant movement. An excess number of fighters on the battlefield then meant players had few ways to properly protect themselves from an onslaught of enemies. Plus, if smaller player counts worked out for success stories such as Gears of War and Left 4 Dead, the hope was that Titanfall would similarly benefit from a show of restraint. Consumer skepticism abounded with respect to the cloud as well. Many concerns stem from the furor surrounding the disastrous launches of Diablo III and EA's own SimCity in 2012 and 2013, respectively. The unreliability of internet connections raised a few red flags in its own right, not to mention the fact that not every region hosted Azure data centers. As a result, territories like South Africa missed out entirely on the game's release because Titanfall depended so heavily on cloud support. Not everyone dismissed the potential of cloud-based gaming. The importance of Azure to Titanfall's viability led to conjecture that the shooter counted among the first true next-gen experiences, and many would come to agree with that sentiment. The title reviewed favorably upon launch, receiving high marks for its exciting gameplay and the crafty implementation of mechs. Some argue the game raised the bar for first-person shooters, while simultaneously delivering on a quality experience the Xbox One desperately needed. Those who weren't convinced by Titanfall's charms felt the dearth of multiplayer modes, lack of a single-player campaign, and the limited pilot and Titan builds left much to be desired. In the years following Titanfall's release, cheating and hacking scandals effectively ruined the game for much of its user base. It didn't help that Respawn continuously pulled resources from the title as time wore on. The brand received one more chance to stick the landing, yet circumstances beyond the creator's control left Titanfall 2 swaying in the wind relatively early in its life cycle. By June 2016, Respawn Entertainment's first mech-laden military shooter had generated an impressive $500 million at retail. It enjoyed a rather long tail on Xbox One in terms of player retention, yet the PC player base tapered off in the months following release. Many considered this a result of minimal content offerings and the absence of a proper story campaign. The development crew didn't disagree. User feedback and internal research showed Titanfall's primary issue did indeed come down to slim pickings. One solve lay nestled in the necessity for a single-player mode, which Respawn hoped would help the series reach a wider audience. The team dismissed any attempts at relegating itself to following convention, however, and instead tried introducing pilot mobility and Titan destruction to solo play early in the sequel's creative process. As far as targeting this particular gameplay loop was concerned, executive producer Drew McCoy said they wasted a decent amount of time on endeavoring to graft multiplayer mechanics onto the single-player experience. When this period of trial and error concluded, yet another phase began, informed by a decision to split up much of their creative crew. Such division engendered what Respawn termed action blocks, unpolished prototypes crafted by individual designers who were tasked with building interesting ideas that would shape Titanfall 2's narrative campaign. The studio planned on stitching together the best concepts, thereby concocting an overarching framework wherein each single-player mechanic worked in concert. Apart from discouraging iteration on discarded prototypes, there were generally no constraints placed on what the action blocks could or couldn't include. Designers freely explored everything from platforming mechanics to puzzle-solving segments. Even the time travel shenanigans that appeared in Titanfall 2's final build grew out of the action block stage. Over time, these experimental efforts established the touchstone of the solo campaign, grounded in a design structure labeled 2-1-1, so named for its emphasis on single-player levels involving 2 parts pilot combat, 1 part pilot mobility and puzzling, and 1 part Titan combat. Game director and co-writer Steve Fukuda explained to Games Radar that Respawn's 2-1-1 model unlocked the spirit of the narrative adventure from a design perspective. And in looking to Half-Life and Portal for inspiration on how best to convey story, Titanfall 2 creators developed a winning formula bolstered by piecing together various action blocks into one cohesive whole. Senior game designer Chad Grenier's crane puzzle block elevated the Beacon mission, for example. Meanwhile, Sean Slayback's pilot throwing concept, though too complex for interactivity, found its way into multiple cutscenes. Attempts to channel Half-Life drove the injection of a mystery narrative, one capable of keeping users on their toes while giving them reason to experience the campaign in full. A buddy story set the stage for this ambitious goal, casting players in the role of a militia rifleman who becomes a pilot after inheriting a Titan. Notably, the protagonist's mechanical buddy demanded just as much developmental effort as every other aspect of the expansive sequel.
Power at full capacity. Pilot, we must establish a neural link in order to proceed.
In Titanfall 2's nascent stages, Respawn knew it would pair the protagonist, later named Jack Cooper, with a buddy character. The sidekick internally bore the nickname of Buddy Titan, or BT for short, before receiving its BT-7274 designation. Drawing inspiration from Lethal Weapon and Beverly Hills Cop, the union between Jack Cooper and BT would begin like that of a typical buddy cop pairing, seeped with awkwardness that evolved into a captivating bond. Believably presenting such a tale to players proved quite the challenge. The studio thus turned to Terminator, RoboCop, and the anime Gargantua on the Virtuous Planet as sources of influence, yet hoped to build an independent thinking mech that could come across as more than a simple automation. As well as being equipped with a machine gun and missiles then, BT was also armed with a unique personality. Early in production, the mech either presented as an obedient pet or a disagreeable AI partner. The latter behavioral trait drove playtesters to dislike the character. Fitting the walking war machine with some semblance of a personality necessitated finesse, apparent in BT's myriad animations. Cutesy animations reminiscent of Pixar's WALL-E were avoided at all costs, considering their incongruity in the war-torn setting. But because the world of Titanfall often saw pilots form deep bonds with Titans, BT had to exhibit cognizance in some sense. An emotive eye served as one essential solution, providing a human-like characteristic bolstered by specific mannerisms like BT appearing right-handed when Jack took control, but using the left arm dominantly when functioning independent of player influence. All told, a 5-person crew balanced BT's range of intricacies after approximately 7 months. However, the melding of lovable qualities with an innate partiality towards causing mass destruction additionally demanded representation in the Titan's physical appearance. For one, BT needed a design separate from its counterparts, something easily identifiable in the throes of conflict. A distinctive look for the machine started with a defined silhouette, much akin to the unmistakable outline of Clint Eastwood characters in spaghetti westerns. The design team further differentiated BT from the pack by adding brighter colors to its back, ensuring users knew which direction their partner faced when attempting to access the cockpit at a moment's notice. Finally, elements from contemporary military technology, like the Apache helicopter's angular body, were incorporated into the build in an effort to prevent the robot from appearing too out of place in a war story. Such incredible attention to detail indicated Respawn viewed the single-player campaign as much more than window dressing for an otherwise $60 multiplayer game. The motivating factor behind the story-based experience didn't exclusively hinge on a desire to ingratiate fans and newcomers in the Titanfall universe, however. Rather, the studio also perceived it as a means for onboarding people into Titanfall 2's online component, letting users familiarize themselves with wall running, movement, and Titan weapon mechanics in a relaxed environment. Lead designer Brent McLeod divulged as much in a discussion with The Telegraph upon explaining how the multiplayer suite evolved between games. In replaying the original title, Respawn staff realized the super chaotic moment-to-moment action made it difficult to discern areas of improvement after failing. Slowing down the pace of Titanfall 2 helped in myriad ways, as did supplementing reactive gameplay mechanics with proactive decisions for players to make. Said changes manifested in the addition of challenging maps and modes that forced multiplayer competitors to seriously consider their loadout selections ahead of each match. The new environments received simplified designs for similar reasons, with the express intent of offering predictable and easy-to-master levels. Titanfall 1's limited options for playable Titans fueled several other multiplayer-focused adjustments during production on the follow-up. As opposed to the 3 mech types that comprised the first game's lineup, Respawn built 6 different Titan classes the second time around, each one specializing in a certain ability. An incendiary arsenal powered the Scorch class, for instance, while the North Star Titan upped the ante via its combined skills of sniping and flying. The new Titans, alongside grapple and phase shift abilities, cater to playstyles that befit specific user preferences. The same held true for Pilot and Titan customization options, which further addressed critiques leveled against the franchise's 2014 outing. Better still, Todd Alderman, the person responsible for Call of Duty 4's groundbreaking progression system, left his mark on Titanfall 2 by introducing a similar feature to the fast-paced shooter. Progression elevated both Respawn and Titanfall to new levels as the company moved away from the proof-of-concept project that was the first Titanfall and iterated on its successful mobility innovations. Unfortunately, all of the IP's core strengths and newly added enhancements mattered little when a fall 2016 release date sandwiched it between 2 of the genre's biggest heavy hitters.
People like you always want to be the hero. The problem with being a hero is you have to be willing to die for what you believe in.
Respawn unleashed a teaser trailer for Titanfall 2 in April 2016, followed by a full reveal during the E3-adjacent EA Play event that June. In addition to promising a story campaign that explored the unique bond between man and machine, EA and Respawn surprised audiences by confirming the sequel would launch across PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. Vince Zampella once divulged the original Titanfall had always been a timed console exclusive for Xbox. It was EA's extension of the deal not long before launch that kept it from gracing PlayStation hardware. PS4 owners were pleased to finally have a seat at the mech-shaped table, except the poor timing of Titanfall 2's release meant countless first-person shooter fans across all platforms were unlikely to give it an honest chance. Titanfall 2's October 28th due date arrived 1 week after Battlefield 1 debuted, and 1 week prior to Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. The former's release date announcement unsettled pundits and fans, yet EA CEO Andrew Wilson assured investors in a May 2016 earnings call that Battlefield and Titanfall appealed to different audiences. Bearing that in mind, the publisher saw no reason to worry whether its biggest fall releases would cannibalize one another. Game director Steve Fukuda sang somewhat of a different tune post-launch, acknowledging concerns that a publisher wouldn't put its full muscle behind an IP it didn't own. Naturally, the back-to-back shipping of Battlefield and Titanfall sequels only exacerbated the unease. And despite the critical acclaim and positive word of mouth, Zampella would later tell GameSpot that Titanfall 2 sold well but should have performed better. He attributed the shooter's shortcomings to its super-crowded release window and aggressive pricing. Regardless, the future still seemed bright for the Respawn-owned brand. Real-time strategy game Titanfall Assault expanded the franchise to mobile devices in August 2017. Apex Legends landed 2 years later, inviting players to join a battle royale set 30 years after the events of Titanfall 2. On the heels of the battle royale's arrival, Zampella teased more Titanfall content for late 2019. Andrew Wilson subsequently elaborated on this news upon confirming EA's plans to produce a premium Titanfall experience for the same timeframe. For reasons unknown, the premium title never so much as received a formal reveal. Vince Zampella's May 2020 statement to IGN that no new Titanfall games are in development implied Electronic Arts and Respawn had shelved the previously teased endeavor. Dwindling support for the sequel further compounded uncertainty about what lay ahead. And what lay ahead were darker days.
2, 4, 1.
A Steam sale paired with the release of Titanfall content and Apex Legends worked wonders for Titanfall 2 on one hand. SteamDB data showed the sequel's player count had increased by 650% across 2 days in April 2021. Good tidings for the then 5-year-old title. On the other hand, however, server errors and DDoS attacks wreaked havoc on the game throughout the year, effectively negating its short-lived resurgence. These targeted hacks often proved so severe that players found themselves unable to access a match. Frustrated fans publicly aired their grievances, believing EA had committed precious few resources to preventing the attacks. But a dubious Save Titanfall campaign involving Apex Legends hacks and ulterior motives allegedly aimed at reviving the unannounced Titanfall Online overshadowed those who merely wanted to enjoy their favorite multiplayer game undisturbed. Following a year of peaks and valleys, Respawn concluded 2021 by discontinuing sales of the original game. While hardly surprising news given Titanfall's age, fears that the franchise's days were numbered took hold. The studio attempted to quell such concerns. Its insistence that Titanfall remained central to Respawn's DNA won over some, though skeptics won't soon be convinced. After years of feeling undeserved, especially in the wake of Apex Legends' meteoric success, who can blame them? Yet it's the fruits of the Battle Royale's success that may one day see eager pilots stand by for another chance at Titanfall. Thank you for watching. We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous patrons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier. Alex Moretti, and those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier. Brock Piviroto, Darirap Sigurdsson, GetWrecked.com, Kira May, Landy K. Hayes, Mario Herrera, Milkshake. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to our channel and backing us on Patreon.